Security Advisor is leading dignitaries including the Minister of Interior, the Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, the Commandants General of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, as well as heads of paramilitary agencies to this meeting.
I hereby inaugurate.
It is the official inauguration of the federal government's Council for the Coordination and Protection of Critical National Assets and Infrastructure, aimed at addressing the recent spike in vandalism of national infrastructure.
Critical national assets and infrastructure, which undergird our transportation system, energy grids, communication networks, and essential services, are the backbone of our society. However, in an ever-evolving landscape, fraught with challenges, these assets are also facing growing threats from various sources, including criminal terrorists. As National Security Advisor, I am delighted and honored to inaugurate the Federal Coordinating Council for Critical National Assets and Infrastructure Protection, which will midwife our efforts in the protection of Nigeria's critical national assets and infrastructure.
Recent vandalism of national electrical installations threw parts of the country into darkness, affecting businesses and impacting negatively on security and economy. However, the newly inaugurated council is expected to provide guidance to prevent, arrest, and restore vandalized assets.
What is happening in Nigeria today is it's just about any dying insecurity situation. They start looking for infrastructures, they start looking for soft targets, and they start looking at how to hit targets that they are hitting. But obviously, with this particular council, I'm so happy that the end has come for those vandalism and various threats that we have in terms of our critical infrastructure. And of course, the NSCDC core responsibility is to protect critical national assets. And I think with this initiative today, that has come to life.
We must continue to lay emphasis on the need for domestic and international cooperation to protect local and regional connectivity projects based on respect for international law and fulfillment of bilateral and multilateral obligations towards international and regional organizations and initiatives.
The National Security Advisor chairs the Council, while the Minister of Interior serves as the co-chair of the Council. All heads of security agencies and paramilitary agencies are members of the Council.
And that is where our conversation will be starting off from. We have joining us virtually retired Major General Henry Aola, former Commander Special Task Force Operation Safe Haven. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning.
And good morning to you. It's been a while.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Indeed. So let's start off from that point. This council has been inaugurated for the protection of critical national assets. Let's get your take on that first.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the first thing really is to salute the wisdom and the initiative, which actually is long overdue, but thank God it's coming at this time. But there are many things involved. I haven't praised this initiative. There are a number of things that must be done immediately to follow up in order to make sure that we situate this action within the statutory functions and statutes and acts that are in place. Ordinarily speaking, this kind of council should come as one of those commissions, executive bodies, that you have enshrined, established by Section 153 of the Constitution, and then you have them outlined in the third schedule, and then Part 1 in particular, that had a long list of them, the commissions and the council. If we take the example of the United States, they have the National Security Council, and then they have the Homeland Security Council. rather than just focusing on critical infrastructure and assets, I think it should be, we can make it holistic. It's a good start point. In fact, that's exactly what they did in response to 9/11 attacks. It was on that same October, the month following the 9/11, October that year, 2001, the president signed an executive order establishing the Homeland Security Council. And then it was quickly followed up by an executive directive later in that month. And then by 2002, it was then codified, and then you then had the Home Security Act itself that now put it in proper, legal framework, so that it could become a body that can, that the National Assembly can legislate for, and budgetary functions can then follow. I would advise that we follow that track. This is good as a start point. And then, of course, we have to bring in, when you now have, in our own case, since we don't call ours Homeland Security, what we have is Interior. So I would suggest Interior Security Council or Internal Security Council, better still. Of course, the ministry is Ministry of Interior. That's the main ministry, the core ministry. But then, so we can call it Internal Security Council, in which case we cannot have it's actually a replication of the National Security Council itself, even for the US, with just additional security agencies that got to do with internal security. And in our case, so if you look at the National Security Council, which is made up of the president as the chairman, the vice president as the deputy chairman, then you have the chief of defense staff, you have the minister for interior, minister for defense, minister for foreign affairs, and then you have the national security advisor, and then you have the inspector general of police. Those are the 8 statutory members of the National Security Council. So if we take our cue from that to now have Internal Security Council, we can then have, in addition to those, we need to have the Minister of Finance. In our case, because we don't have a Minister of Energy, so we have to have 2 ministers instead of 1. The Minister for Power, and then the Minister for Petroleum, maybe 3, or even the Minister for Transportation, they have to come in. Then, of course, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, and the Ministry of Health and Human Services. Now, these are very critical sectors within the security, internal security of the nation. So if we have that, then it becomes a holistic approach to solving all the internal security issues, including the non-kinetic approach we've been talking about in dealing with terrorism and insurgency. We've more or less left everything to the military. We should have actually had this kind of council that would take care of the non-kinetic aspect, so that the military can then face the kinetic aspect and give us the best in the circumstance.
It's interesting the angle that you have approached this from. I mean, you have likened this council, you've commended it, and you seem to want an expansion of it, not just in the security area, but also in the non-security area. However, given the example that you've given, that we're taking it, we should copy what it is that the United States has, the establishment of the Homeland Security, which they did in the wake of 9/11. 9/11 was a major terrorist attack on the Twin Towers. You all remember how that went down, a day that, the world watched in horror as those airplanes hit the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. They did an investigation, and they came up with the knowledge that there was even though there was knowledge of what was going to happen, there was a lack of coordination amongst the security agencies. And so that led them to establish the Homeland Security Unit. In Nigeria, would you say that we have done such an investigation to see what it is that we're lacking? Because this has been set up, this council has been set up to protect what we consider national infrastructure, coming in the wake of major power lines being felled in the forest somewhere in Niger State. Has there been any critical investigation to find out what precisely could have led to that? What are the gaps in our information or, in our security information management or intelligence management that has now necessitated the establishment of this National Security Council?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy you're taking it from that dimension. Now, let's look at it more closely. I don't even think we need any special investigation because these ought to be one of the statutory executive bodies, that should have been there as part of the structures and institutions of national security architecture. So we didn't even need to wait for any incident. That's why I say it's long overdue. Let's look at the United States again. Following the 9/11, many responses were immediately activated. Number one, you talked about the establishment of Homeland Security Department came up. But first of all, there was the creation of the Office of Director of National Intelligence. We don't have that in our setting up to now. Even with all the insecurity, terrorism, insurgency that we have had. It just shows that we have not responded sufficiently to the security environment we have been facing in the last over 10 years. And so by now, we should have, I know the Office of the Security Advisor could play that role, but then it has to be, it's not something that is supposed to be assumed. It has to be put in there. And that's why I've been advocating all the while, that the National Security Agencies Act that created the Office of the National Security Advisor ought to have been amended, reviewed and amended, and made more consolidated and comprehensive than it is today. If that had been done, then we would have had, either we make the same NSA or make a different person who technically would be an intelligence security person, with that kind of background, to become the Director of National Intelligence. Or if we want to combine it with the Office of the National Security Advisor, it's also good. Now, that's number one. They also came out with what they call the USA Patriot Act, that uniting, strengthening America by providing appropriate tools to obstruct terrorism act. That's the USA Patriotic Act. Now, they also came up with the TSA. So remember, the airports in America used to have individual, each airport had its own security body that was responsible. But from the experience and lessons learned, they now consolidated it to the national, what they call the TSA, now Transport Security Administration. Now, that was not all. They went ahead also to now jig all of the security and intelligence agencies, the 18 official ones and the private one, the private sector ones, all together to create a stronger national intelligence community, which the Director of National Intelligence sits over, and oversees and coordinates, so that those gaps between intelligence gathering, collating, dissemination, and the ability to consolidate and have a convergence, have the intelligence sharing environment, having fission centers, having a coordinated tasking of the intelligence agencies. All of those things, we have not done much in those areas. We have so much to do. And that's why you find that we just dumped everything at the door of the armed forces, and everybody else went to sleep. That's more or less what it has been. So we need to wake up and put more of these things in place so that we can free the military to do the kinetic part of their work. And then we will be able, the other agencies will be able to take care of this non-kinetic. And I'm saying that when we say security, don't forget, I'm not looking at just defense. I'm looking at the entire gamut of the security sector, all the subsectors. And that's why, of course, transportation, energy, and all of that are coming, including health. Because human security is gone beyond just physical security today. So all of those security-related ministries and agencies that need to be brought in need to, to come into, so that there can be a synergy of activities, and then we can have a good punch in one direction. What we've been doing are more or less knee-jerk reactions to, incidents and activities of the of the adversaries and all of that. We need to sit down and have a deliberate, conscious, consensuous, painstaking brainstorming that will give us all of these things that are required to have a robust security architecture for the nation.
I'm just wondering, where is this critical thinking? Because when countries come up with this, they don't just bring it from up out of the blues. I mean, especially when they have to do it for the very first time. There must be a body responsible for the critical thinking involved in needing to bring the establishment of some of these, security apparatus, as you have listed. Where should that thinking be happening in Nigeria? Yes, we've seen the establishment of this. Is it council now? Yes, it's a council. But if it's just to protect national infrastructure, someone will say, isn't that what the NSCDC was set up to do? Are we saying that they're unable to do it? Has there been something that has happened that we found out that there needs to be a more coordinated effort in establishing this particular council?
Yeah, thank you very much. Rightly put, you have said it that the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, they have that as their primary task of protection of critical national assets and infrastructure. Of course, I mean, it goes beyond them because when you look at the outlay of what we refer to as critical assets and infrastructure, I mean, certainly agencies like custom, immigration, they're all involved. Of course, that's why the Ministry of Interior is actually more or less the core ministry. All of that, we just have supportive role, and because their own assets are also involved. But let's look at it this way. I've always made this point about the nation. The work of moving a nation forward, of developing a nation, is not just that of those in politics or those in power. We have not been able to craft a system of systems that makes room for harnessing all the human resources, all the intellectual resources, all the institutional resources that are within Nigeria. That is the problem. We've been having a situation where leaders, in fact, it's made worse by politics, because in politics, I mean, we have seen it over the year. Politics trumps up any kind of character. Some people who have never done anything, I mean, successfully in their life, they just find themselves to be political leaders, and they are toying with our lives and doing experiments with us and all of that, because that's what politics are trumped up. I mean, it's a different, and I remember there was a government I mean, when I'm not in support of military regime, but I remember during the military regime, there was a government that tried to put in a kind of having political bureaus in the parties, so that there is a way of milling leaders, even at the party level, where they will be trained, they will be nurtured, they will be mentored, and there will be, before they come out to the open to even vie for any office, you can take for granted certain level of training, education, and exposure. And unfortunately, we didn't follow that line. Again, if we have a system of systems where it's not just one person coming in and just riding roughshod of the entire system and just not allowing, not even getting to know how the system runs, and just wants to do his own, just enforce his own and foist his own agenda. Look at it, even in this government. I remember when the cabinet was formed and some of the parastatals had their chief executives and all of that. So I don't know if you watched that. How many of them, when they got to the ministries, took maybe the first 1 week to be briefed, department by department, to get to know what exists, what's on ground. And you find some, the very day they got to the ministry, they started issuing orders as if they are, even military regimes don't operate like that, as if they know everything already even before they came there. No, you don't run a system that way. A system must be crafted. If you get to a new, even if you have worked there before and you were away for 1 day, I mean, it just costs you to even say, okay, I've been away from here. You guys brief me. What are the new things you've been doing since I left?
General,
how are you doing them? What are the procedures and processes? What are the rules and regulations we have to keep? And this has affected the nation in all sectors.
Mr. General, if I may come in here, if I may come in, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted that if we could streamline a little bit. Because a question I had in mind, which you're already going towards, is to ask you, which one is a more critical asset that should be protected? The people or the hard infrastructure? Because so far, the focus has been on protecting the critical hard infrastructure. But some will argue that the biggest national asset that ought to be protected, and you mentioned it, harnessing the people resources towards the security that we're seeking to have. Is it a question of reorientation of those in leadership, or helping them to see that we need to look at building our people in order to have the security we desire?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like you rightly said, I touched on human security. I think it was the former president of America, the 35th president, John F. Kennedy, who said that our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. Our fundamental resource is the human mind. Now, it is very true. And that's why it's a system that takes care of things like that, where you have made deliberate room, you have given room for individual resources to be harnessed, okay, right from the lowest level to the national level, such that there are provisions for inputs coming from different, first individual, then institutions, and so that there can be a handshake between the bureaucracy and the technocracy of a nation. That's how nations run. It's known all over the world that the best hands and the best heads really are usually outside government. Because government is a small part of your own nation. The private sector has, the larger chunk of, human beings and human resources. And so it's a deliberate handshake that you create. Now, let me give an example of that. In policy process, for example, and that's another problem where we are flip-flopping with our policies, because we have not followed policy process in framing them. In policy process, if you follow the five-stage model, there are several models, there are 4 stage, 5, 7, but if you use the 5 stage where we talk about setting the agenda, which is stage 1, stage 2 is policy formulation, stage 3 is policy adoption and administration, stage 4 is policy implementation, and stage 5 is policy evaluation. Now, if we follow these 4 stages of policy process in churning out, in crafting our policies, you'll find that we'll not be making these mistakes, because there are even softwares of simulating a policy upfront. Play it, know what problems it's going to generate, how you are going to handle those problems, all done before you come out with the policy. So the idea of, there is no such thing as a verbal policy in the first place, that you make one statement and it becomes a policy. No, sir, there's no such thing. And these are the things that ensure that the human resources are tapped. In policy evaluation, for example, which is the 5th phase, which is actually meant to evaluate the policy you are put in place on annual basis, if you like. I mean, depending on how practicable it is, such that you bring technocrats who are experts in that field to the subsector concerned. They will look at what you have done over the time, look at the policy goals that were set, look at what you have achieved. If there's a gap, what are we not doing right? What can we do to do it better? And do all of that. And that provides a deliberate handshake between the technocrats and the bureaucrats. Okay? And that's how nations, kind of up their game and, kind of tweak the skills and competencies of the public sector. All of these things are supposed to be there. Let me remind you, in 1985, between 85 and 88, there was this civil service reform that brought about having what we call the common departments to all ministries. One of them is the one called Department of Planning, Research and Statistics. Now, the design and the theory behind that, the grand plan behind that, was that department was supposed to be the hub of every ministry, where the thinking, like Mark said, where the strategic thinking and planning is done for that ministry. So that it's not a minister that comes and just start doing what he feels like doing. That should have been a plan in place. All we need to do is to know where the last minister stopped, and it will continue from there. That ensures, first, that you engender the best. Secondly, it ensures continuity. it ensures convergence of ideas, and it ensures that there is a smooth takeover also. Even our handling and takeover procedures, we take care of all of that so that there is no institutional loss of memory. I mean, as it has been for most of the time.
Who would draw up that document? Who would have the responsibility to draw up that document that whoever is coming would have to follow through? Who draws it up?
You don't even need another document. I'm saying that these structures are already there. In all the ministries, you have Department of Planning, Research, and Statistics. They are there. But you see, what has happened over the years is that different regimes, different leaders have come, and what we have found is that they run roughshod of the civil service so badly. I mean, I've had the opportunity of serving in 2 ministries, Ministry of Communication, Ministry of Defense, working with the minister. And I've seen how hard it is for civil servants to remind the politicians that, look, this is what the civil service regulation says about this. And they just want to do their own thing and just move on and all that. And with that, over the years, the civil service have more or less been made prostrate, if I may like. Not willingly, but because people have just, I mean, right from I was old enough to know right from 1975, the civil service have been more or less the whipping child of the public service. And from generation to generation, from regime to regime, rather than recognizing that these are, it's a workforce that is very critical to moving the nation forward. No matter your policies and programs and projects, the implementers are still the civil servants. So if you ignore them, you ignore the processes that have been put in place, you don't listen to them, then that's what brought us to where we are. Those things are already there. We just need to go back to them. And then to ensure that people don't just come and just ignore. We have this, I think it's an African elite mentality. I call it KBAC or feudal mentality, where we want to do what we like, how we like, when we like, if we like. And we don't want to, when we are reminded about, oh, this is the procedure or process for doing it, say, hey, put that aside. Or they say, oh, you are speaking English. No, please. That's how nations who succeed work. They work by systems. I think I've talked about this book, Why Nations Fail, by Achimogu and Robinson. That book made an argument about what makes a difference between nations that are doing well and those that are not doing well, as the system that they put in place. And when I say system, that goes all the way from policies to strategies to institutions to structures to procedures to processes to routines and checklists and drills for doing everything. So that people don't just come in and trying to look tough and they are just running arbitrarily and reducing the whole system to as if it's their household they are running, That is how nations work. In fact, that book gives an example of the Nohalis, who you have some of them in America and some in Mexico. And the point they were making is the fact that it's not their forefathers, it's not the stars, their destiny is not determined by their geography and all of that, but by the system that each nation has put in place that is able to sustain development, is able to create a system where hard work is recognized and rewarded, where there are laws, they are made justiciable, and there is swift, stiff, sure sanction for dereliction from those laws. All of these things are part of what makes a system to work. These are fundamentals we must go back to as a nation.
Well, right now we do have this council coordinating Council for Critical National Assets and Infrastructure Protection. We now have it. Well, I mean, we can wish that it is expanded. We can wish that, it is fancier than it actually sounds. The thing is, we want it to work. We want our assets protected. It's not right that an entire region of a country was out of electricity for many days, almost running into weeks, as a result of infrastructure, critical national infrastructure being attacked. So where else would you be saying we should be deploying these members of this council to now that they have been inaugurated? There certainly are expectations of them, aren't there?
Yeah, thank you very much. Now you can see why I'm saying that we need to go further. Thank God, and I appreciate the initiative of the president, the NSA, and so on. Now, this council is as critical as the National Security Council. I mean, properly put, this inauguration actually would have been done by the president himself if he was in town, I'm sure. Because it's a high-level council. It's supposed to be one of those councils enshrined that Schedule 3 and Part 1. And what that then means that there will be a concept note, a concept paper that will outline first the membership, the constitution, the organization, the functions, and then the framework for collaboration, for synergy, for working together, so that it's not left to, because I like the face of who is the Minister of Interior, or the Minister of Interior is a friend to the NSA, so things are working. So a year or a time when you have, where they are not such close friends, then no, you don't run a nation based on how you feel or whether you like somebody's face or not. And that's why we must go further to put proper, acts in place that will spell out these details. You see, in Nigeria, we are so good in expecting things to happen without doing what is required to be done to make it happen. Things don't just happen. They are made to happen. I mean, look at it. Even where we have clearly spelled out rules and regulations, people still try to breach them. Is it where you just make one gesture of, oh, let's come together, let's do something? Nations don't run on goodwill. You run on rules and regulation, processes and procedures, drills and routines that must be complied with, and there must be spelled out sanction for anybody who runs rancor of them. And also, that needs to be put as an immediate follow-up, so that all the agencies that are involved will know themselves. If they are going to be quarterly meetings, or if they are even going to train together somewhere, especially the operational agencies, there has to be coordinated joint trainings, unified training, that will cover all of these things. I mean, I looked at the acts that established the National Security and Civil Defense Corps, okay, that gives that function, simply put. Okay, but they cannot do it alone. In the National Disaster Response Plan, we also have what we call National Disaster Units, or response units, even among the units of the armed forces. That's when the push comes to shove and you have to call out the military. There are battalions that are earmarked for that purpose. There are training they ought to have done in peacetime with immigration, with custom, with civil defense, with the Ministry of Health, with humanitarian department, or with former NEMA used to coordinate. I used to be in charge of the Armed Forces Simulation Center. And we used to have such simulation exercises for all of these agencies and ministries that are concerned. I don't know whether we're still doing it, but these are things that must be done, because the National Emergency Management Agency, for example, as it used to be, even though it's under Humanitarian Affairs Ministry now, they didn't have any of those agencies under them. They are only supposed to coordinate people that are not under their control. Now, that itself does not function well. I had the opportunity of leading a set of students to Senegal some years ago, from the Staff College. And one of the lessons we learned from what the French people have, they call it sapeurs-pompiers, is that they train their emergency management agency, which have pulled together under the Ministry of Interior, the search and rescue, fire service, the search and rescue for all the terrain, maritime, air and land, all of them, all of those agencies, they are pulled under one structure that is directly, that the Minister of Interior can task directly. And so you don't have to start begging the person coming from one ministry or the other to show up. And that was, and not only that, they actually start out trained in military institutions. Okay, they train in the depot, like recruits are trained for the army. They go there, get trained. The officers also go to the academy. But they come out and then they are posted to that department, and they now start, specialist training, got to do with their different area. Either you are doing search and rescue or fire service and all of that. Now, that is a very functional system.
It's interesting, General, sorry to interrupt you once more. It's interesting that you're even citing examples of other African countries, neighboring African countries, you know, who can show us an example of how this can be effectively run. You mentioned that the NSCDC cannot do it alone. Is it that they cannot do it alone, or that they have not been empowered sufficiently to be able to do it? Because, I mean, when we're talking about infrastructure protection, some people will talk about having the facilities, having the requisite training, having the capacity. Is it that they cannot, or we have not made the investment that we ought to empower them to do it?
Yeah, thank you so very much. You know, our case is a case that, I mean, ordinarily you will say it's an abnormal setting. I remember in 1988, I had the opportunity of going to Japan with the then minister. And I remember during our discussion with the Japanese telecom sector, we were complaining about people cutting our telephone cables. And I could see the eyes of one of the guys looked at us, excuse me, does that happen anywhere in the world? Because we're dealing with very abnormal situation. Ordinarily, you don't expect somebody, you know, I mean, in his sane mind to think of going to destroy something that serves the common good. You know, it doesn't, I mean, it's not even contemplated in other times. So when you have a bad situation and an abnormal situation, you also have to go the extra mile to deal with it. And that's what is happening. That's what I'm saying. Ordinarily, if they were just to protect those critical assets and infrastructure with the mindset, I mean, we're taking for granted that no citizen in his right mind will go and try to cut electrical cable or telephone cable or destroy pylons carrying power lines and all of that. That's, I mean, then that would have been sufficient to do that. But we are having something abnormal, so we have to also go the extra mile to be able to deal with that. That's why I make that point.
What is the extra? Because it would seem that from what you have spelled out, there is an extra to what it is that the NSCDC will be expected to do, or that this council is now expected to do in place of the NSCDC.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's obvious now from what the council is set that today. And as I said, there have to be documents outlining properly the rules of this council and the tasking of this council and all the agencies and ministries that will be involved, and outline what each of those, you know, we do, and where there are overlap of competencies and rules and tasks, how to handle it, who will be the lead agency under different kind of disasters. These are, in fairness to the National Emergency Management Agency, over the years, they have actually produced documents of national response strategy and what to do, and who is the lead agency, if it's fire disaster, if it's flood disaster, if it's, you know, different. These documents are there, you know, so we just need to go back and use them and bring them to the fore. So many things have been left undone over the years that it's not as if some people have never given a thought to these things before. There's a big difference between doing and, I mean, verbalizing what to be done, and then actually working out how it will be done, and then ensuring that it's done. And when there is failure, ensuring that you enforce, and that there are sanctions and punishment for dereliction, for malfeasance. You know, that's what we need to put in place. And just like any other sector, we need to just wake up as a people and know that, look, no nation can move forward where there is no guarantee of each citizen doing the right thing and doing his own bit in his own sector, in his own subsector, wherever he may find himself.
I did see, and I don't know whether you saw, I imagine that you saw them as well, the visuals of the critical infrastructure, the power line and the tower that was felled by these bandits. And it really bogs my mind as to why it is that some people will have the effrontery to be able to do that. I mean, ideally, you would think that people will be afraid that electricity could be running through that thing, and if it comes down in a way that, people's lives, even the lives of those who are attacking these things, could be at risk. But it didn't matter that, that was actually a very dangerous exercise. They did it anyway. What runs through your mind when you see a visual like that? Are you concerned that, some people have gone beyond all fear? Is that they do not have any reasoning? in that regard as to how even this could be a danger to their own lives?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. I mean, like we said, that's looking at it normally. Now, we know that Nigeria has been in a state of this crisis, these security threats of insurgents, terrorists, and all of that for a while now. And for them, anything that will get the attention of government, I mean, it's like a nuisance value being put to work. Don't forget that terrorists often have either their action is expressive, they are pushing an agenda or an ideology, or it's instrumental, in which case maybe they have something to gain. But in this case, really, like you rightly said, I don't see what they want to gain in this other than just being disruptive and maybe displaying their nuisance value and expressing and perhaps making it difficult for government to work and the nation to function. Maybe there are some people who are happy putting us in this state. I mean, of course, ideologically, they really don't think they have anything to lose. That's what it means. And so, of course, if you are talking of insurgents who have the ideology of willing to even to die for what their chosen cause, then the idea of the danger involved is not even an issue for them. It's not. I mean, I remember as Commander Operation Safe Haven, I remember one of the occasion, one of the guys that was at that time, if you remember, in the early 2012, 10 to 12 to 13, where they were using the style of using vehicle-borne IEDs to blow up churches, blow up worship places, mosques, and all of that. Now, what they used to do is to tie the leg of the terrorist to the pedal of the car, such that it doesn't have a choice to even change his mind to say it's not doing again, or to say it's not delivering that load, that ID load. So he has to find, if he misses the target is meant to deliver it, he has to find a place to deliver it, and he's joyfully going to do it. With the anticipation, the hope that he's doing something for which he has something to gain, and there is an eternal reward for him. So when you have people with that kind of mindset, you can't take anything past them. I mean, anything that gives them that kind of fulfillment, we do. And that's why we have to also up our game to be ahead of them, both in strategic thinking and action.
All right, thank you very much. Major General Henry Aola is a former commander, Special Task Force Operation Safe Haven. Thank you for coming in this morning and sharing your insights with us. Let's hope that this council will hit the ground running and pick up those documents, as you said, that are lying on the shelves.
Thank you very much, Nat'l. Thank you, Maupe. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Isaiah will be back in a moment after a trip into the Business Morning studios on Sunrise Daily.